No.
Mr. Russell.
No.
Mr. Ham. Mr. LeBlanc.
No.
Mr. Muir.
No.
Ms. Purvis.
No.
Mr. Fage.
No.
Mr. Bowser. Mr. Parent.
No.
Ms. McGraw.
No.
Mr. Ron Chisholm.
No.
Mr. Olive.
No.
Mr. Morse.
No.
Mr. McIsaac.
No.
Mr. Clark.
No.
Mr. DeWolf.
No.
Mr. Dux.
No.
Mr. Langell.
No.
Mr. Chataway.
No.
Mr. Hinsby.
No.
Ms. Bailey.
No.
Mr. Carey.
No.
Mr. Morash.
No.
Mr. Chipman.
No.
Mr. Barnett.
No.
Mr. O'Donnell.
No.
Mr. Hurlbert.
No.
Mr. Corbett.
Yes.
Mr. McDonnell.
Yes.
Don't be nice to these guys.
Ms. Maureen McDonald.
No. Yes. Sorry.
Order, please. Order, please. Order. Order, please. Order, please. Just so there's no confusion, the vote has been recorded as a yes.
Mr. Dexter. Mr. Holm.
Yes.
Mr. Manny McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Gaudette.
We.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. McCaskill.
Yes.
Mr. McEwen.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon. Absent. Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Sampson.
We.
Mr. Steele.
Yes.
Mr. DeVoe.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Chisholm. Mr. Estabrooks.
Aye.
Mr. Epstein.
Aye.
Mr. Pye. Mr. Boudreau.
Yes.
Those in support of the motion, 16. Those opposed, 27.
Order, please. The motion is defeated. And I'd like to advise the host that the 20 hours in committee of the whole house for Bill 36 has expired. And the motion is, shall the bill carry? Order, please. A recorded vote has been called for, and the motion before the House is, shall bill number, for all honorable members, shall bill number 36, the Financial Measures Act, carry?
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Christie.
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Russell.
Yes.
Mr. Ham. Mr. LeBlanc.
We.
Mr. Muir.
Yes.
Ms. Purvis.
Yes.
Mr. Fage.
Yes.
Mr. Bowser. Absent. Mr. Parent.
Yes.
Ms. McGraw.
Yes.
Mr. Ron Chisholm.
Yes.
Mr. Olive.
Yes.
Mr. Morse.
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. DeWolf.
Yes.
Mr. Dux.
Yes.
Mr. Langell.
Yes.
Mr. Chataway.
Yes.
Mr. Hinsby.
Yes.
Ms. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Carey.
Yes.
Mr. Morash.
Yes.
Mr. Chipman.
Yes.
Mr. Burnett.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
No.
Mr. McDonnell.
No.
No.
Mr. Dexter. Mr. Holm.
No.
Mr. Manny McDonald.
No.
Mr. Gaudette.
No.
Mr. Smith.
No.
Mr. McCaskill.
No.
Mr. McEwen.
No.
Mr. McKinnon, absent. Mr. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Sampson.
No.
Mr. Steele.
No.
Mr. DeVoe.
No.
Mr. Robert Chisholm, absent. Mr. Estabrooks.
Nay.
Mr. Epstein.
Nay.
Mr. Pye. Absent. Mr. Boudreau.
Yes.
Those in support of the motion, 28. Those opposed, 15.
Order, please. The motion does carry. And the time has expired, and we are now into the debate. Late show.
Order, please. The subject of this evening's late debate has been submitted by the honourable member for Clare. The honourable member Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's now 6:05.
6:30.
Can you tell me how the time is being apportioned, like between the three parties? Is it equal time till 6:30? Is that the way it goes?
It'll be approximately 8.25 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in my place this evening to discuss be it resolved the government has abandoned small business. And Mr. Speaker, if there ever was a truism in this province, it's that the government of the day has completely forgotten about small business. Mr. Speaker, small business is the backbone of the provincial economy, yet this government is doing nothing to ensure that businesses have access to capital. Nova Scotia Business Stats 2002 from the Department of Finance, this government's own Department of Finance. In 2001-2002, there were 9,507 new company registrations in the province, a 9.3% decline from 2000-2001, and a further 0.2% decline from 1997 to 1998. Mr. Speaker, the number of new partnerships and business name registrations declined from 57.7% of all new registrations in 1997-98 to 51.3% in 2001-2002, and that's according to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Mr. Speaker, almost three-quarters of Nova Scotia businesses employ fewer than 5 people, and more than 90% of Nova Scotia businesses have fewer than 50 employees, the upper limit most often used in defining small business. Businesses with more than 50 employees make up nearly 8% of Nova Scotia's business population. The question, however, Mr. Speaker, is that what is Nova Scotia government doing to help small business? The answer, of course, is nothing. Companies in rural areas have little or no access to capital as decisions about loans are handed over to computers instead of local bank people or local economic development people who work in that particular department in the province. Well, they kept that premise, at least towards small business, Mr. Speaker, but businesses like Sobeys, Crosley, and Xerox get the subsidies, while small businesses are left with little or nothing. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not against creating assistance for creating jobs, but why is this government simply handing over money to large companies while small companies do not have a chance in this province? When this government took over, it gutted the Department of Economic Development, which means small business out of luck. For all intents and purposes, there is no such a thing as the Department of Economic Development. Instead, the province created Nova Scotia Business Inc., which used to be called Industrial Estates. And of course, Industrial Estates had no time for small business like this new entity. The other thing that makes NSBI an insult to Nova Scotians is the fact that Cape Breton obviously doesn't matter. And I'm going to table some statistics here, Mr. Speaker. The Cape Breton Regional Municipality is the second largest municipality in the province, And yet businesses in the CBRM are forced to call long distance to access a business retention and expansion officer. I want to table that Nova Scotia Business Inc., a letter to the committee clerk, the legislative committees, and it outlines the financial transactions between November 6, 2001 and December 31st, 2002. And there are approximately $15 million worth of transactions here. Most of them, by the way, in Tory ridings. But not only that, most of them, if they're not in Tory ridings, they're in Metro Halifax. And the one area of the province that perhaps needs the assistance least of all of any area in the province is this particular area, yet it gets the most from this NSBI. A grand total of $45,000 was spent in Cape Breton Island out of this $15 million fund. $45,000 was spent, and that went to Inverness, a Tory riding. The area in Shetty Camp. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have got money in Shetty Camp. What I'm saying is that a paltry amount of $45,000 went to the island, and that went to a Tory riding. And I'll table that. You know, some will say, well, here we go. Cape Breton is whining again, but I can say that it's not only Cape Breton, it's rural Nova Scotia who is not accessing any money out of NSBI or economic development. In the case of the CBRM, for example, at one time, small business could go to the Economic Development Office in Sydney, and they had the latitude to sit you down, discuss your business proposal with you, and actually allow you to access funds through the local office in Cape Breton with a certain limit. But at least small business could go in there and talk to a live person across the desk in the second largest municipality in Nova Scotia, and actually have the opportunity to present a case. Now, that's not the case anymore. The NSBI, Mr. Speaker, is made up of 12 people, one of whom is from Cape Breton Island, one of the 12, and that was a Tory appointee. Even though a number of local people in Cape Breton, some very close to the current Minister of Economic Development from the North Side area, who wanted to get on this particular board, sent their name in. One person comes to example is a very community-minded activist in Cape Breton who wanted to get on this board. His application was ignored, and the Tories appointed a friend of the government from Cape Breton. So we have one of the 12, and that one is a Tory appointee. So what chance do you have? And rural Nova Scotia has very little representation on that board as well. Rural Nova Scotia has very little representation. One of the problems that we also have here, it's interesting that as well in agriculture that the government has also set up an arm's length agricultural body called AgriPoint again, with no presence in Cape Breton. No presence again in Cape Breton. So I mean, if this government considers itself to be helping small business, I don't know where they're helping them at, but I want to remind you, Mr. Speaker, that this government said when it came to office that it would not issue any more grants or outright loans to business. Better than that, they would do it better than that, Mr. Speaker. They would adopt a new method. What are they doing? They're looking after their friends. They're giving money out in the form of grants whenever it's advisable to them and whenever they think they're going to get any political mileage out of it. And other than that, Mr. Speaker, they've left the rest of it to NSBI, who is not responsible to this legislature. The minister does not have to stand in his place and justify public spending by NSBI. And Mr. Speaker, I think that's an affront to this legislature. At least when the previous government had dealings with business in Nova Scotia, it had to stand up in this place and justify those business deals. And I think it's an affront to democracy that the minister or his department does not have to account to this legislature for public funds that are being doled out by NSBI. Mr. Speaker, that's an affront to democracy. This government is doling out money exactly where it wants for political purposes in this province, and because of that, the way they're doing it, they don't have to answer here directly in question period or in public accounts in this forum here in the House during estimates for their expenditures. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll take my chance to speak now, and because I'm curious to hear what the minister says, although I'll give up my opportunity to rebut. Mr. Speaker, for sure, this government has abandoned rural Nova Scotia, or it has abandoned small business, and certainly lots of those in rural Nova Scotia are small. The first place when this government became newly minted, the first thing they did in their first official budget was to cut the production technology branch. Now, this branch offered extensive extension services to the agricultural sector. This was a branch that offered the blueberry specialists and other types of specialists that could go out and offer assistance to businesses that were starting up. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure what the thinking is in this province, but we seem to think about agriculture as something completely different than other businesses. We don't seem to think of agriculture as business in the same way that we think of other sectors of the economy as business. And we seem to do a lot more kicking of agriculture than other sectors. And I don't know whether we think that this doesn't make good ministerial statements, whether or not the media doesn't pick up on statements around agriculture and it's not newsworthy. What it is, I have no idea why it is that we don't really pick up the ball and pursue agriculture in a much more aggressive way. I mean, we hear the classic statements. I think we all say them, and I'm not sure we all mean them, but we talk about value added. We say apples to applesauce. But we know that agriculture can produce jobs and can create wealth. It does it. Sarsfield's Frozen Pies is an example, although they've sold that company, I think, to the Weston company, and Sarsfields have started up another similar operation. But this is one that and even if you look back at the history of that family around the Canning area, that they've been involved as entrepreneurs in business for many, many years. And I think that this is an area where actually has sustained rural Nova Scotia. Now, the government, I think, always seems to say the right things. I don't think I need to table anything from the Blue Book, because I think it's probably been tabled here. But no government incentives of any kind will be provided for new startups when they are competitively harmful to existing businesses. Well, that almost makes sense. But when you look at it, Mr. Speaker, you have to say to yourself, okay, what is the government really doing then? And I have to say that I have a problem using taxpayers' dollars to give somebody a competitive advantage over somebody else in business. So if the government is meaning that, then I agree. But yet, I'll bet you it'll be really difficult for anybody who was thinking of getting into the retail grocery business in this province to get startup money, but yet Sobeys can get a $3 million tax break from this government. So they're given a competitive advantage to anybody who may be trying to exist in that market, but they're not a startup company. They've been around, and therefore they don't actually need the money. But somebody starting up would need the money, would need an advantage to get going. And so, my thought is, well, if we're not going to help someone to get started, then we certainly shouldn't be helping people who are operations big enough that they don't need the money, or that they will get a competitive advantage to keep other people down. We saw the same thing with other operations related to NSBI, that the board of directors is making decisions that affect the members of the board and their businesses, and I think that this is just a little too close to home for giving each other advantages that other people outside of that board or outside of that circle. We have to consider, Mr. Speaker, the business community in Nova Scotia. We're only 1 million people. So the business community in Nova Scotia, and especially the larger business component of this province, is very small. I mean, it's hard to believe that they don't all know one another in one way or another, connected in one way or another. So you need, I think, something far more arm's length than NSBI when it comes to this. And I can think in the forestry sector, we say the same thing around value added. I can think of a company in Colchester North, the Tatamagouche area, Northern Lumber, was creating hardwood flooring. Could not get a break from this province in any way. They couldn't get hardwood. And we have thousands of acres of Crown land, And yet, the way the volume agreements are given out, Mr. Speaker, is that a mill will be given, so many thousand acres, 100,000 acres of crown land, but even if they're not making use of all the species, like they may not be using hardwood at all, other mills cannot get access to that could use it. And this was a company that went under simply because it couldn't get the hardwood it needed, but it had the markets and couldn't supply them. If we're going to consider what decisions are made by governments, then let's take a look at the Alma Loop in toward New Glasgow area. Here's an example of Trans-Canada Highway that actually bypassed some of what used to be a major route there. I think Magic Valley was the little village there along the highway, and so the route changed. So all those businesses along that route, as much as they tried to make their case, they were unsuccessful. And yet, down the road at exit 21, someone is given $200,000 to set up a truck rest or a truck stop there, which offers services that can compete with these businesses. And there was no $200,000 offered to them to help them through this. So, Mr. Speaker, you have to wonder, these are people who, if anybody can remember that little village when it was being built, it was almost a building at a time. This started, people use their own funds, their own sweat equity. They put everything they have into starting these enterprises and not really given the support that they should have been given, Mr. Speaker, in order to carry these further when one government decision actually changes the economic prospects for them. If you remember, in the Shubenacadie area, the House of Hay, which was there, and the highway moved, and which devastated the gas stations and the businesses along that route. We've let people down, I think, in many ways, in terms of our insurance rates are killing small businesses. Our gasoline prices are killing small businesses. If you look at any company that's in a delivery business that uses vehicles between insurance and gasoline, it's killing them. Taxi drivers, commercial trucking, any of these things are all adding costs to what these businesses must bear, and there's been no help from this government to circumvent any of that, Mr. Speaker. And I think we're sadly lacking in our approach to vocational training when it comes to children or students who are not going to make it to grade 12 to get into community colleges, school, and that, to get to grade 12 is not in their plan, but yet we used to help them out with grade 8, grade 9, getting into vocational. So thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise and have this occasion to talk to the resolution presented by the Liberal caucus that said, be it resolved that the government has abandoned small business. And it couldn't be farther from the truth, Mr. Speaker, and I can speak firsthand to the work and effort of the good people within my portfolio of economic development and those that represent the 5 Crown corporations and the wider effort of this government to work towards an environment that supports, sustains, and grows small business in Nova Scotia. And I'll speak to several factors, and I'll try to respond to some of the comments made by my colleagues both in the New Democratic and Liberal caucuses. But ultimately, Mr. Speaker, what we do know, that as we stand in this legislature and we're present here today, we are at an all-time high in the history of this province with the number of people employed, 436,300 Nova Scotians, a mark in the history of this province of the number of people employed, and we're seeing that growing throughout the province of Nova Scotia. We're seeing gross domestic product growth in the province of Nova Scotia. In 2001, that was 2.5%. In 2002, 3.8%. What was the national average? 3.4%. The Nova Scotia economy is growing, and it's thanks to the backbone of our economy. Our economy composite of 80% small business in this province from one end to the other. And what we did, Mr. Speaker, when I became minister is we toured this province region by region, community by community, wherever possible to meet with the stakeholders, with individuals, community advocates, and those that are working in the interest of growing not only a stable business environment, but a good growing quality of living for home communities. As a result of that, we heard about access to capital and the frustrations people were experiencing. As a result of that, I met directly with the Nova Scotia Cooperatives Council. An initiative has emerged with the Cooperatives Council and the Credit Union Central and their member organizations for the sole purpose of ensuring that we set up a program that will address the needs of working capital for small business, something I look forward to detailing further to this House. But small business throughout Nova Scotia, recognizing that big banks have pulled away, well, this government has stepped up to the plate in partnership with those entities that are working. As well, we've embarked upon a process with community business development corporations, or CBDCs, that are throughout Nova Scotia. We're embarking upon a dialogue that talks about what are the needs for micro or really small, the smaller level of businesses, the 1- and 2-person operations. What supports can we do in partnership with them? We heard as well some of the concerns people had with regards to Nova Scotia Business Inc. in terms of the level of funding that was accessible. When we looked at small business loan portfolios starting at $250,000 or above, we've listened, we've responded. That's now down to $100,000. There's a small business unit established within NSBI. Consultations have been ongoing, both one-on-one with business, hundreds and hundreds of them across the province, Mr. Speaker, not to mention the Capital Ideas Roadshow that has been on the road talking about how do we grow and gain access to capital for small business in the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, those are not actions of a government that isn't listening or responding to the needs of small business, but it's in concert to other things that are happening within inside government, and I speak of the skills agenda and our efforts working within the community college to ensure that what we do is responsive region by region for the people of this province, ensuring small business are able to deal with the labor needs, that individuals can get the type of training that they require to be able to work and live in the communities of their choice around this province. Mr. Speaker, we've also looked into how we can enhance and support Community Economic Development Investment Funds, or CEDIFs, as well as the Equity Tax Program that supports small business. We're seeing more and more Nova Scotians from one end of this province yet again investing more dollars to help support small business, to grow community-based initiatives in this province. That's a reality, Mr. Speaker, and something I'm very pleased and proud of this government to be part of. We're looking at other issues with regards to venture capital in the province and how we do that to support initiatives within the regions of this province. I've heard my colleague from the Liberal Caucus talk about what the role of this government has been in and around Cape Breton. Well, it's been substantial, Mr. Speaker, and our annual investment of $3 million. He likes to refer, the member from Cape Breton South, to $2 million. It's been $3 million a year. We've given our next installment to a $12 million commitment. And they want to talk about the province of Nova Scotia not matching the federal government. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of this government that it's invested wisely and invested in a unique, one-of-a-kind partnership in the country of Canada. Already, Mr. Speaker, we've seen $45 million invested in over 20 new or existing companies in Cape Breton. What's the result? Over 2,800 sustainable jobs as a result of this government's investment. Aside from our annual investment, this government has also complemented, not NSBI, this government and our other programs for economic development, an additional $8 million in efforts in and around Cape Breton. But what has it also meant in terms of leveraging opportunity? Well, as a result of our commitment, investment, and belief in Cape Breton, it's not just $45 million, it's not just part of a $98 million fund that will continue to grow opportunities for prosperity and for small business enhancement. What we have seen is an outcome of $244 million to date of private investment. For every $1 of growth fund dollars, Mr. Speaker, we've seen $7 from the private sector invested. To me, that is smart investment, investment that is supporting communities. We see revitalization initiatives, Mr. Speaker, throughout the province of Nova Scotia. Communities coming together and taking a hold of their destination. And we are there, lock and step with them, Mr. Speaker, and we're working on the programs they need. That's why economic development is working on a community development policy we'll be bringing forward. That's why we're looking at enhanced broadband access throughout the province of Nova Scotia, and I've been pleased, and I will, with other announcements to come, that'll see increased access by small business in rural regions for broadband in this province. Mr. Speaker, we're listening, we're responding. We're seeing the telecommunications network responding with regards to cellular access so that every region of this province will soon have access to digital service and access to the needs that they have to compete, whether they're in downtown Halifax or downtown Cheticamp, they're going to have a competitive business environment. We're seeing that businesses in tourism sector have said clearly the number of online bookings are increasing, so we're ensuring that those individuals that work in such a vital sector of our economy are getting the supports they need, and we're working in partnerships with other levels of government, with industry and those individual businesses to grow the opportunities that they see. When they want to talk as well about opportunities for small business, I look at the initiatives that are driven from within the regions, whether that's the response by Team Guysborough to the issues of Canso and some of the downturn with regards to fishery decisions, coming together as a community, as a region, finding solutions that are there. I look to other initiatives where this government has worked through Innovacor, putting an additional $8 million into the Nova Scotia First Fund so that companies such as Ocean Nutrition, as well as Kytogenic, that are incubating opportunities here in the metropolitan Halifax area, when those opportunities are commercialized, where are they being provided in terms of jobs and production? In Guysborough County and the community of Mulgrave. Mr. Speaker, that's smart business, and it's a Nova Scotia approach, that something can be developed in Metro and actually expanded upon elsewhere in the province of Nova Scotia. We're seeing the Strait Area Superport Corporation coming together and positioning that community for offshore development. We're seeing Laurentian Energy in Sydney going out and raising community capital for efforts. And Mr. Speaker, I know there's not enough time. I could go at one end of the province to the other, but this government has not abandoned. We're supporting and growing small business in Nova Scotia.
Thank you. Time for the adjourned debate has expired. We now resume committee of the whole House on bills.
The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Would you please call Bill number 1, an act to provide compensation for full-time and volunteer firefighters who suffer from an occupational disease?
Yes, Bill number 1, the Firefighters Compensation Act. The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I really had expected to listen to the eloquent words of the member for Cape Breton Centre and got up only when, I can't say that, only to welcome him to his place. But I did want to talk for a minute, member for Cape Breton Centre, about this bill. Obviously a very important bill. Since I formerly worked for the Workers' Compensation Board, I think I know a little bit about these things and how they work. And firefighters have a patchwork of coverage in Nova Scotia. Unfortunately, for historical reasons lost in the midst of time, firefighters were not required to be covered by the Workers' Compensation Act. It was voluntary on the part of the municipalities or the employers for which they worked. And so what we have in Nova Scotia today is from municipality to municipality, we have different workers' compensation schemes. For example, in the municipality in which I live and work, the HRM, it turns out firefighters are not covered by workers' compensation because they felt that private insurance was more generous. A very unfortunate thing indeed, Mr. Chairman, especially when changes are made to the workers' compensation legislation to make the legislation more generous. Now, of course, that can have the impact of causing private insurers to extend coverage, but it may not. And really, the reason for that is because most firefighters in Nova Scotia are volunteers, and workers' compensation is designed to compensate workers for wages lost as a result of their injuries, but volunteer firefighters, by definition, pardon me, Mr. Chairman, by definition, don't have any wages. And so it was left for the municipality to decide who and for how much they wanted to cover their workers, and it's led to this unfortunate patchwork. Same can be said of federal firefighters, but I know my colleague from Cape Breton Centre is going to be talking more about that later. And certainly for the diseases for which they are covered, there's an unfortunate patchwork. One of the most difficult issues in all workers' compensation are industrial diseases, where somebody gets sick as a result of their workplace, the conditions of their workplace, but it can sometimes be over the course of many years. And the difficulty, of course, is proving it. Somebody may suspect their workplace made them sick, but actually getting the medical and other evidence necessary to prove it to the satisfaction of the Workers' Compensation Board is a higher hurdle than most workers can get over. And so what this bill does is it raises a presumption in favor of a firefighter, and that's as it should be. It's properly backed up with medical and scientific evidence, and this is a kind of forward step that we should see more of. Of course, Mr. Chairman, There are some changes to the bill that we had asked for, and I know that my colleague from Cape Breton Centre will be pleased to speak to those amendments in due course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to, like my colleague from Halifax Fairview, to state that we will not be up long speaking on this. But there's a few items that I would like to put before this committee. And, you know, this was a bill that in some ways was certainly born out of cooperation, was that we had contemplated, when indeed we did bring Bill 2 forward. But in doing so, it was a bill that in a lot of ways, in a lot of opposition bills, was not a bill to kind of come out of nowhere to kind of snooker the government, but yet a bill that we said, look, we're bringing this forward. And it's going to deal with automatic assumption for firefighters, and it's a bill that we think deserves to be supported. It's a bill similar to the bill that has been passed in the House in Manitoba, and that is being contemplated by a private member's bill in Alberta, and it's over 20-some states in the United States of America. So, you know, these were items that we thought that I believe could have come together and certainly have been supported. And indeed, I think we sought and have gotten some improvements in this bill, or we will see some improvements in this bill. I would still contend that I would have liked to have much rather seen the definitions and so on in the legislation as opposed in regulation. And that I look forward to an amendment coming forward regarding the idea of retroactivity, because, Mr. Speaker, this deals directly to what my colleague from Halifax Fairview had said, that when workers have fallen through the cracks here, that firefighters, for some unforeseen reason, were allowed, because if they were employed by municipalities, to opt in or opt out of workers' comp. And again, I think go back to my colleague from Halifax Fairview. Indeed, in question period, he brought up another aspect of people that are allowed to opt in or opt out of workers' compensation, and the tragic results that can happen. We've seen a workplace death that largely left, say, a funeral expense to be borne by family members because people are allowed to opt in and opt out. So, you know, it's very, very important that we know what the rules are when it comes to people that can come in and come out of workers' compensation. And I hope that this bill will go into some direction of the government finally realizing what this means. Now another group, Mr. Chair, that is left out of here is the federal employees that work in the firefighting industry, Mr. Chair. These are people that would have worked in our airports and indeed at many D&D locations. As I know, a lot of members on the other side are off to come up and tell us in many words what they think about our men and women that are members of the armed forces and all the ancillary jobs that go with it, and the importance of people, especially in Metro here, what these people give to not only our community but to our country. And we sought, by way of amendment earlier on, from the government to include these people in here. And for some reason, the government did not see the wisdom or did not support these women and men who work for our Department of National Defense as firefighters on their many bases. The government wanted to preclude them. And I think there's a bit of a folly in there in precluding them, because actually they're the ones that we could probably embrace in this bill if we were worried about cost. It would be the ones we could most easily embrace as a no-cost item. Because as we all know in this House, that the federal government is what's referred to at WCB as a self-insurer. It insures it and pays the Workers' Compensation Board a administration fee for doing such things. Similar to back in my area where the Cape Breton Development Corporation existed. The Cape Breton Development Corporation, by being a federal corporate body, as a crown corporation, not a corporate body, but a crown corporation, was a self-insurer, and what they would do is at the end of the month, they would, the workers' comp, I'd say the end of the month, it may be quarterly, but whatever, in a timely fashion, that the government would, or the employer would send off, get a notice from the provincial government of saying, this is what your bill is, plus your administration fee. So it's a really no cost to the board. It's not like we're assessing them at $7 on the 100 or whatever. And the board has to pay it. The board says, look, the people that were covered, whether it's automatic consumption, as I say, for the coal miners or injuries as related to those in the workplace, here's your bill. Here's the administrative cost. Pay it. So what we had, if we could have taken the federal workers involved here, if we had taken the federal workers involved here, that this would have been done at I would ascertain zero cost to the board and zero cost to the government. And I think it would have been a wise thing to do, but I think the government themselves have to stand and be answered why they would not want to encapsulate those people in this legislation. So, Speaker, I said when I took my place that I will not be speaking long on this bill. I would hope I've made some impact on the government in my discussion around coverage for federal employees. I believe it's important. I believe that if the government should bring forward an amendment regarding retroactivity for the 10-year period, that we would be supporting that amendment. And I think it goes a long way to putting the focus to this bill. And I would hope that it brings focus to this government, that the ideas you play when you separate groups out for payment, and you can say you can pick and choose who can opt in and opt out of workers' comp. Clearly, the Dorsey report has put forward, which is a stakeholders report that says everybody should be included. And Mr. Chair, I agree with that position, as do all the stakeholders, whether it's small business, labor, and so on. So I will be taking my place, Mr. Chair, and I will certainly look forward to voting on the amendments to Bill 1. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in my place here today in support of the amendment, Bill 1, Firefighters Compensation Act. And I think, Mr. Chairman, it's an example of all parties realizing the importance of this bill to firefighters in this province. Does it go far enough? No, it doesn't go far enough. Can it be approved on? Yes, it certainly can be approved on. But it's a start, Mr. Chairman. It's a start. I think what we have to do once this bill clears the House is turn our attention to making this bill better and more inclusive in the coming months and years, and realizing the kind of job that firemen in this province have, and the fact that they are servants of the people of this province in a dramatic fashion, really, because normally, or all of the time, when they go to fight a fire in this province or to some kind of a chemical situation or something, they have no idea what they're approaching, what's going to confront them, and how they're going to deal with it, except that the firemen that I know, Mr. Chairman, a lot of them friends of mine, don't question where they're going. They don't question the need. They just do it because they're out there protecting you and I and other people in Nova Scotia on a regular basis. Some of them, most of them in this province, with very little remuneration for that. You might say that they're doing a tremendous service in their various parts of the province that they live to the rest of us who are citizens here. Now, mind you, we do have some professional fire departments in the province. When I say professional, the full-time firemen, But nevertheless, they have a role to play as well. But the volunteer fire department throughout the province have a very valuable role to play in looking after our lives and in areas of the province where you simply couldn't afford to have full-time, permanently paid firefighters in those areas. So I think we have to realize that as legislators in this province, we have to realize that the role they perform is an extremely important role, a necessary role, a dangerous role, a role that a lot of us would rather somebody else do, but they're out there doing it, and they don't question why they're doing it. They feel they have a responsibility to help their fellow citizens, and they take this responsibility seriously. If you ever talk to firemen in this problem, they have an esprit de corps that's second to none. They have a brotherhood there, and that brotherhood not only attends to the daily needs of our people in this province regarding safety and firefighting issues, but community-based issues as well, Mr. Chairman. They are the first ones there for any cause that's going on in the community. And I look at my own community, Mr. Chairman, with our fire department, both volunteer and the permanent force in the Cape Breton Region Municipality, get involved with things like the burn camp, down, and you see the firemen out doing their thing and trying to make that camp even more successful each year than it was previously. So it's those kinds of things that make us realize how important they are to the community. You name the cause in our community and you'll find firefighters are involved in it. But so we should be involved in what we're doing here, is trying to make their lives and the lives of their families just a little bit better by providing the kind of bills that are before this House to respect what they're doing, but not only that, but to give them some measure of certainty that we appreciate what they're doing. But again, Mr. Chairman, I don't think the bill goes far enough. I don't think it's as inclusive as it could be, but it is a start. It's a start, and it's a bill that we can support, and it's a bill that we will support. And I really want to thank the government House Leader for his efforts there to try to encourage all the parties to get together on this bill, to talk to the Workers' Compensation Board, which he did, and then to have the courtesy to call me, and to call the House Leader of the official opposition to explain his position. I appreciate that, Mr. House Leader. I appreciate the fact that this bill will improve the situation in dealing with the volunteer fire departments and the permanent forces in this province. It is a start, Mr. Chairman. Our caucus will support it, and look forward to even the day will come when we can approve on this bill, and hopefully that'll be soon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cape Breton, Nova.
Nova means nouveau. Oui. Now, I'm very pleased to speak briefly on this bill, Mr. Chair. I recall when it was called for second reading, I made a good number of criticisms of its content, and that will be found in the pages of Hansard. I'm not trying to take credit. I'm not like the NDP. They try to take credit for everything. But I would never do that, Mr. Chair, being of my humble and humble as pie. I don't mean the honourable member of Dartmouth North either. But I'll tell you, Mr. Chair, it's good to see a bill improve as it goes along the course. I'll say that much. And if the government followed some of the suggestions I made on this bill at second reading, I commend them. I commend them. That's not taking credit, that's issuing commendation, which is somewhat different. Can you make any suggestions? No, Mr. Chair, I can make all kinds of suggestions. If the honourable member wants to hear me, if I advance up into a higher gear, I suppose that I could. But I said at the beginning I was going to speak briefly on this bill, and I intend to keep that promise. So, Mr. Chair, rather than lapsing into a lengthy lecture, let me say that I commend the government and I commend the opposition both parties in the opposition, for the forward-looking role that all three played in this matter. Now, how's that for being magnanimous and generous? I don't think you can do any better than that. So having said that, Mr. Chair, I think at this point I'll take my seat and I'll await the outcome of the debate.
Thank you. Are there further interventions on the title? Seeing none, I would I shall ask the question. Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall Clause 2 carry? The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I think all members of the House have copies of an amendment to Clause 2, Section 35A, and I think we have probably debated that, the particular ramifications of this amendment, which simply applies retroactivity to the bill back to 1993. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask for the favourable reception by the House and passage of that amendment.
Order, please. The amendment, of course, is in order. Shall the amendment carry? Shall the amended clause carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Carry. The Honourable the
Yes,
the Honourable the Government House Leader.
I don't intend to make a long story out of this, Mr. Chairman, but I think we've done a good work in passing this bill, and I appreciate. And I appreciate the support of the House. Now, Mr. Chairman, would you please call Bill number 28, the Apprenticeship and Trades Qualifications Act?
Yes, Bill number 28, the Apprenticeship and Trades Qualification Act. The Honourable the Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want members present to know that this is a worthy piece of legislation. We have a couple of amendments which we think are of some consequence. And I want members to know, are the result of the fact that during law amendments we had the opportunity to hear from a number of presenters, and in particular, I think it's appropriate that members of law amendments are aware that Carol McCullough, the president of the Construction Association, took the time to appear in front of law amendments, at which time she made very clear that there was a consultation process that was put in place. But, Mr. Chair, more importantly, I think it's very important that we know, and we can all speak from personal experience of the apprenticeship program. You know, Mr. Chair, I want to make you aware, as someone, of course, who's interested in your constituency, that when it comes to the apprenticeship program, in particular certain trade qualifications, Mr. Chair, the average age of tradespeople in this province are 45 or more. 45 as a year, age or more, of various trades. And I can use some examples for you, Mr. Chair, ones that I know you shared in a friendly dressing room in a situation in Prince Edward Island. And, Mr. Chair, I want you to know that one of the gentlemen, and I say gentleman because off the ice he is a gentleman, on the ice he's not a gentleman, but I want you to know that one of the particular men that we met that afternoon in that Charlottetown dressing room is a plumber. And, Mr. Chair, he is very, very concerned. He's 51 years of age, Mr. Chair, and he wants to be able to pass on the quality trade that he, of course, has brought forward in the community that I represent. But as you probably are aware, Mr. Chair, there's a growing concern because of the fact that more and more of these tradespeople are getting older and older. And, Mr. Chair, the problem is, and this will come forward with the two amendments that I'm going to bring forward, in terms of pre-employment and making sure that the apprenticeship program is made fully aware to young people in our schools. Now, Mr. Chair, as you probably know from having children in the public school system, you know, and I can say this, and the Minister of Education I know will share this with me, that not every young person in the public school system is destined for university. And I can say that, Mr. Chair, because of the fact that the university degree granting program is not the place for everyone. It's not the place for everyone to meet academic success, And it is certainly not the place for everyone, Mr. Chair, to meet with employment success, to meet with financial success. And I want you to know, Mr. Chair, if I take you back to that moment in that dressing room in Charlottetown, we can well know that there was an opportunity afterwards when the tab had to be collected. And my friend the plumber could point out to the fact that his, and we don't ever dare talk about this, as of course in our particular role as legislators in this province, heaven forbid we ever brought up what we make. I recall that day, Mr. Chair, and I won't go back to it, when I, as an MLA, looked forward to the opportunity that I would bring forward what we get recompensed to do this job. But Mr. Chair, I want you to know that that particular plumber and what he makes is twice what we make, and he will bring it forward as he picked the tab up that day. Mr. Chair, you want an introduction? You may.
Thank you to the member for Timberley Prospect. Yes, an introduction by the Honourable, the member for Pictou West.
I want to thank the Honourable Member from Timberley for letting me make this introduction. And I'm very proud tonight to make an introduction to the members of the legislature tonight. There is a constituent of mine up in the East Gallery. In fact, he is my son, my youngest son, and I want Donald William Bailey to stand up and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to the member for Pictou West's son in the gallery, and welcome to all our guests this evening. I trust as the honourable member for Timberley Prospect continues in his dissertation, he will refer to the score of that hockey game he keeps referencing. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
And I welcome Mr. Bailey to our gallery. It's nice to have you here, and I want you to know that that name in River John in particular guarantees you a good whack at any Greenwood hockey tournament. But if the camera angle happened to catch it, he has a lot more hair in an older fashion, younger fashion than we do. Welcome to this house, and I welcome the introduction by your mother in this particular historic chamber. What we're talking about here is the apprenticeship bill, and it's of real consequence, Mr. Chair, that I bring this matter back to the relevance of the fact that many, many, many tradespeople across this province are getting older and older. And the concern that I come back to is that, and I'm going to introduce these at the appropriate times when you call them, and I hope members opposite are aware of the necessity, particularly in the public school system, at the high school level, that guidance counselors are aware of the importance of recruiting. And I use that term, Mr. Chair, very, very importantly in this case, of recruiting young men and women to particular trades in this province. Particular trades that guarantee, and I use that word not lightly, Mr. Chair, but guarantee employment in trades that are of real consequence and are of real importance to the service industries across the province. I've mentioned plumbing. I can mention the chef industry. And Mr. Chair, I can recall, and I know the members of the Hansard staff here always are excited when I use this particular gentleman's term, and I will correct the spelling at a later date. But, you know, Chef René van Uysenhuizen, who is, after all, the recognized chef in Timberley Prospect. I want you to know he's also the president of the Timberley Prospect NDP Association. He's looking forward to putting those signs up one more time. He's incidentally recently a recipient. He's recently a recipient of the Golden Jubilees Medal, been recognized. Chef René, incidentally, he brought to my attention when he left Mount Allison University, where I knew him as a university football player, and I want you to know, Mr. Chair, many times Chef René was always there late at night to make sure that when the barbecue was being served, that there were certain football players that had that extra steak on the barbecue. But you know, Chef René, when he was looking for another place for employment, he came to Halifax, and Mr. Chair, you know, he called me as a Mount Allison football player, and he said, Bill, actually called me Billy, I want to know where I should live in Halifax. And I said, Chef, if you're coming to Halifax, you want a place to live, you come live in Timberley Prospect. That's the place where I would like to have you have the opportunity to work for me as an MLA and as a New Democrat. And you know, when we eventually moved into the community, and I can tell you he lives at 106 Charles Street, and it is a sign location. I want the member from Cape Breton Nova to know that at this particular piece of legislation, Mr. Chair, which you're showing to me, I want you to know that Chef Marinus van Riesenhuizen, who is a Dutch Canadian, a proud Dutch Canadian who came to this country, to this province, he's concerned about the fact that in his particular vocation of being a professional chef, that there are not young people going into his trade. So I had the wonderful opportunity to consult with Chef Rene on this topic. I've had the opportunity to listen to Carol McCullough. I've had the opportunity to listen to guidance counselors across this province. It's important, Mr. Chair, that we recruit young people from one end of the province to the other. And when it comes to the clause by clause, I look forward to the support of members opposite, particularly when it comes to pre-employment, when it comes to the opportunity to bring forward the opportunity to recruit young people to these trades. Young people to these trades, because tradespeople are getting older and older and older, Mr. Chair. And I want you to know that the public school system, and there are school teachers present in this legislature, you know, the key thing, Mr. Chair, is to make sure that we recruit young men and women to these trades. And we do it through an apprenticeship, a journeyman's program, a journey person's program, if I say it right, in the year 2003. It's of real consequence that they come to these trades knowing of which they are going to choose. They're going to make a good income. They're going to make a contribution to the employment situation in Nova Scotia. They are, after all, welcome in this legislature as visitors. Whether it's Chef Rene or Carol McCullough, it's a piece of legislation that I look forward to supporting, and I hope members opposite and members of the third party who are so interested in my football career will look forward to supporting these particular amendments. Because, Mr. Chair, these are amendments that we have consulted with people in the trades with, and it particularly concerns the recruitment of young people as they join the apprenticeship and the journeyman's program in this province. So with those few comments on title, I look forward to going through clause by clause and introducing these amendments as they come forward, because after all, this is the very fabric of employment in this province. High schools and high school graduates are not necessarily all destined to go to university. There are great jobs out there for them in the chef industry, in the plumbing industry. And Mr. Chair, I want you to know, because I'm remiss if I didn't mention this. Mr. Chair, I'm fortunate to recommend to anyone who is in the business of looking at bricklaying to look at Blaine and Bryce Morash, two outstanding young men, and I can say to members present, both of these young men, part of the constituency that I represent, are students of mine. They have formed that great company called Coastal Restoration. They have bricklaying as their trade. They need apprentices. They need journeymen to take these jobs on. And this is, after all, what this piece of legislation is designed to do. It's designed to make it more accessible to young men and women to get into the apprenticeship program, and hopefully with the amendments that we're going to bring forward here in a few moments, it will continue to encourage young Nova Scotians, young Nova Scotians of all ages, to go into these trades, to join in, after all, the success that we have with the apprenticeship program, and I look forward to bringing them forward in a few moments, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your time.
I'd like to recognize the member from Glace Bay on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I'm sure you're aware, and all of the members here are aware, it's a rather important issue that we're discussing and debating at the moment. Nothing can be more important than young Nova Scotians getting better trades training through improvements in the apprenticeship program, Mr. Chair, and we need to ensure that the needs of existing and any anticipated new employers in this province and the potential for some career opportunities for Nova Scotians that will exist in the skilled trades will be there, Mr. Chair. Of course, it's an issue that the Cape Breton Trades Council has raised numerous times before, as my colleague from Timberlea Prospect raised as well, the issue of older workers. And Mr. Chair, it's an issue that we're concerned about as well. We look forward to certainly taking a serious look at any amendments that would be put forward. Mr. Chair, there are both industry and business, that are anticipating that the number of certificate of qualifications being issued each year are going to triple by the year 2007. And there is, Mr. Chair, a concern with this act that the fees being introduced for training and for exams and for certifications are going to go up, Mr. Chair. Many Nova Scotians who want to become tradespeople are soon going to be paying higher fees because the province is going to expand its apprenticeship program for industries such as construction, Mr. Chair. It's a concern of ours. We're hoping that it doesn't send somewhat of a mixed signal. On the one hand, you want more young people to choose an apprenticeship program. On the other hand, you're charging more for the amount of fees that they're expected to pay, fees for exams and certificates and registration. So, Mr. Speaker, the cost of training courses is going to jump, registration for the program is going to jump, and the businesses that hire apprentices will have to pay more, Mr. Chair. So those are some items that we're concerned, but certainly, Mr. Chair, overall, our concerns are more so with the fact that young Nova Scotians get better trades training through improvements to the apprenticeship program, which is a goal that we're all looking to achieve, I'm sure, Mr. Chair. So with that, we look forward to taking a look at any amendments that would be put forward, whether they come from this party or the soon-to-be third party in the legislature, Mr. Chair. It makes no difference as long as they're improvements, as long as they're improvements that are aimed at making things better in the apprenticeship program and making things better for young Nova Scotians, Mr. Chair. That's what we're all interested in this legislature. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, shall clause 1 stand? Stand. Shall clauses 1 to 10 carry? Shall clause 11 carry? Oh, I'd like to recognize the member from Timberley Prospect.
I would like to have the opportunity, if I could, Mr. Chair, to have the pages distribute this particular amendment, which is entitled NDP 1, the current opposition, and maybe the members of the current third party could look at this proposed subsection 11.1, where we're adding the proposed clause F, the following, where we're looking at G, that advise the minister on matters relegated to pre-employment training respecting any of the designated trades, and then, of course, the appropriate following of clauses G and relettering of G and H to H and I.
Yes, I'd like to interrupt the member. After looking after this, the amendment is in order. Okay, so once they're distributed, you can carry on with your comments. Recognize the member, Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The mandate of the board should include a statement regarding the provisions of recommendations on the pre-employment training program to the minister and through the minister to the Board of Governors of the Community College. The partnership report recommended transfer of responsibility and funding for apprenticeship related to a pre-employment training program to the Apprenticeship Training Division. Now, it's of real consequence that a process to ensure a high level of communication and coordination between the primary training delivery institutions, the apprenticeship program, and the program stakeholders is extremely important to the apprentice and, of course, to the employer. The current communication and coordination processes with respect to the program changes is inadequate based on the feedback received during public consultation. Mr. Chair, some of those comments and some of those particular words that I've just addressed are the result of notes that I took at law amendments. They are considering the fact that Carol McCullough, who made her presentation at that time on behalf of the construction trades, is concerned about the need for this sort of communication, that it's of real importance that when the stakeholders are all involved, that the minister is advised on matters related to pre-employment training respecting the designated trades. It's not stated, Mr. Chair, so it's of some consequence that it's clearly outlined in the bill, that the words are there and they're in place, and that it's not an assumption, that it's clear that this form of communication is there so that all involved, the board, the minister, the apprenticeship program, are all aware of what is actually involved in the process. It's a matter of some importance that I bring forward this amendment. It would help clarify the process, and I look forward to the support of the members on this particular amendment.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, shall the amendment carry? No. Oh, no. Thank you. Denied. Shall clauses 12 to 28 carry? Carry. Shall clause 29 carry? Seeing the member from Timberley Prospect, you have the floor. Clause 29.
You know, I guess I could ask the question without getting into a rhetorical rant, which I have on occasion been accused of being in this place. Was anybody listening at law amendments? I mean, the amendments, that amendment, and I'm on to the next one, okay? I want you to know that based upon my experience with the apprenticeship program, these are not amendments that are coming from the socialist at the door here. This is not coming from the socialist from Timberley Prospect. This is coming, Mr. Chair, from one of the presenters in front of law amendments. And this particular clause that now we're going to address, I mean, just vote it down in a heartbeat, but it is a particular amendment that I would like to draw to members opposite and the members of the third party. Perhaps they could look at the fact that I'm adding, if the page could please, add the after proposed clause 8K in subsection 29L, respecting the registration of pre-apprenticeship and youth pre-employment programs. And then, Mr. Chair, I would be adding that proposed clauses after that, AL and AM, be re-lettered as AM and AN. So I will give the pages a moment if it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, to distribute those clauses.
Thank you, member. Point of order. Are you standing, Minister, on a point of order?
I can't match up with what he said with the book. That doesn't mean that what he said is incorrect, but I can't make the match. So I'm just wondering.
Is that a question? You're asking the member from Timberley Prospect a question? The Attorney General has just asked the member from Timberley Prospect a question. Not a point of order, but a question. And member, if you would answer.
Mr. Chair, I would clarify that I'm on page 14 and that I am looking at A, if I have this correct, Mr. Chair, and I know the Minister or the Attorney General will apologize for me squinting with one eye. I'm looking at subsection L, and I'm adding the proposed clause AK, which says the following: respecting the registration of pre-apprenticeship and youth pre-employment programs, and then the AL and AM would be re-lettered. So that's on page 14. I apologize for not taking my time in clarifying that because of the results of the First Amendment that I brought forward.
I'd like to inform the member that the amendment is in order. So as the pages pass it out, the opposition will have a chance, or the government and opposition will have a chance to review it, and then the member can take his place to speak to it. Member, do you feel that the House has had adequate time to review the amendment? Do you feel?
Well, I can give the minister all the time he wants, because the members of the Liberal caucus obviously know all about it and they're ready to vote. So, but I'm not prepared at this stage to. If the minister could give me a moment.
Order.
On the topic of bill, I'll do the talking about bill.
Order,
okay, you just sit there. You didn't bring any amendments in. So
order, please. Order, please. I'm asking the member from Timberley Prospect if he feels that the amendment has enough time, has had enough time for review. Thank you. Then I'll recognize the member from Timberley Prospect on his amendment, section 29, subsection 1.
And thank you. And you know, I know that members opposite and members of the third party are always intrigued with the fact that perhaps I stand in my place and refer to the Saskatchewan example or the Manitoba example. But in this case, I would like members opposite and the members of the Liberal Party to look at the fact that this is an Alberta example. Alberta, after all, the home of, well, let's just call it Mr. Klein, who hasn't still accepted my offer, Mr. Chair, to join me at the Midtown for a refreshment. But, you know, this is a piece of legislation that we would recommend this fine-tuning because of the Alberta example. And I would recommend that the authority be created to establish a regulation allowing for the registration of pre-apprentices. The partnership program recommended is a consideration of a registration process for youth apprenticeship. So participants as well as individuals enrolled in a pre-employment program related to apprenticeable occupations. Now, Mr. Chair, the example is the Alberta one, that the registration process would allow for formal recognition of the education and training program, the participation as well as the ongoing communication. It will encourage individuals with respect to career planning and future apprenticeship training and with regards to regulation requirements. Mr. Chair, again, this amendment is one that was suggested at Law Amendments when I had the opportunity to listen to Ms. Carol McCullough, to ask her about the Alberta example. In particular, Mr. Chair, during my comments when we were looking at the title, we were looking at the importment, and I use this word, Mr. Chair, because it's an important term of the recruiting of pre-employment young people into these particular trades. And the Alberta example one, Mr. Chair, is one that I'd like to bring to the House's attention. In Alberta, there is actually a shared responsibility between the high school that is referring or recommending a young person to a particular trade, or actually they can, during their high school years, get credits because they are involved in this particular program. It's a pre-employment program. It's a program worthy of looking at, and this clause will only make sure that this piece of legislation, as good as it is, will be even better. And I would like to point out for members opposite, it's not an example from Saskatchewan. It's not an example from Manitoba. It's an example from Alberta. And for that reason alone, perhaps members opposite, if they've had the time, and the appropriate minister is looking at the fact that this is an amendment which they should perhaps consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, we will vote on the amendment on clause 29, Bill 28. Shall the amendment carry? No. Denied. Shall the clause 29 carry? Carry. Shall clauses 30, 31, and 32 carry? Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall the bill carry? Thank you. I'd like to recognize the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Would you please call Bill number 45, the Insurance Act?
Thank you. I'd like to call Bill number 45, the Insurance Act and Public Bills and Committee of the Whole House. Carry on. Oh, like to recognize a member of the NDP caucus, the member from Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to say a few words tonight, Mr. Chair, regarding Bill 45, and you know, probably more for what it doesn't do than what it purports to do. It's 4 very short clauses, and it purports itself to be a freeze on insurance rates, retroactive to May 1 of this year, up until January 1 of 2004, Mr. Chair. Now, you know, a freeze is something that happens and it stays, I would say, for much more than 7 months, Mr. Chair. It's one that would really get into the marketplace and allow to see if the freeze was workable. But we know a couple of things that are happening here, and we've all seen them, you know, coming to this House and we've by way of testimonials from people seeking renewals of their insurance and so on. And the big thing is, people thought, well, my insurance is due after May 1st. Why hasn't my rates been frozen? Well, the reality is this bill doesn't contemplate that. This is a bad bill. It's a knee-jerk reaction bill. And what it really does is just grab that line. But what had happened, what this government has failed to tell consumers is that if your insurance company had made application to the Utilities and Review Board before May 1 and were granted, then it's done. That you're hooked. You're on the hook for your increases, Mr. Chair. So, you know, this bill just does something for a very limited time. Does this bill stop large insurance companies from redefining their customers, putting them in facility, if you will, or saying, well, circumstances have changed? We see that, as we saw this past weekend with some people, we see where they say, you know, we renewed your policy, but it's gone up. And to that, the customer says, but why has my insurance gone up? I've driven for over 30 years. I'm accident-free. Why has my insurance gone up? To that, the insurer replies, because you're due. We assume that you've gone this long without incurring an accident or even a speeding ticket, that you're due. No sense that government, you know, or that insurance companies would say, this person has done what is mandated by government to pay insurance on their automobile to have it on the road, and they've done so for over 30 years, and all the money that occurred to that insurance companies while that owner of that vehicle drove accident-free as being a bonus to them. No, as a matter of fact, an insurance company uses against them. Now, another area that this bill does not go anywhere near touching is really the crux of the problem with insurance rates. Insurance companies would have you believe that rates are going to the roof because of soft tissue injury. So government wants you to believe, well, if we put a cap on benefits, then this problem will be solved. Well, we all know this problem is not going to be solved. It's not going to be solved with a cap on benefits, and it's not going to be solved with a temporary freeze, Mr. Speaker, or not even a temporary freeze. The best way to describe it is delay. I mean, I've had, you know, freezing in my gums that last longer than this bill, Mr. Speaker.
Let's not talk teeth, okay?
Okay. But, you know, where is the problem with the insurance companies and their loss of revenue? Well, you know, all you have to do is look at federal reports around competition. And the federal reports clearly state that historically, insurance companies did not make a profit directly from their benefits or the pay to the insurance companies by the insured people, Mr. Speaker. They've made their profits off investments. So, you know, they don't take the premium and stick it in the bottom drawer and wait for you to have an accident and then pay you out of it. Obviously, what the large insurance companies do, these multinational insurance companies, what they do is they invest it in the market and let it perform there for a time that they see fit, and then, you know, hope they can incur some profits off it. And knowing full well at some point that actuarial reports will show that they will at some point have to pay some benefits to an insured driver. But what has happened is the market hasn't performed to their expectations. So are they losing money? No. Have they historically made money off of direct premiums? No. Have they made large amounts of money off investing premiums? Yes. Are they making lower monies off investing in premium now? Yes. That's the problem. Yet this government seems to go around and want to, when we offer solutions to the government, this government wants to say they're ill-conceived and they're cockamamie ideas, Mr. Speaker, and that they don't have any real places to look at, except limiting benefits, or in this case, freezing them. One could contend that by merely freezing the benefits or freezing the period, all you're doing is delaying it till after an election. It really has no sense of correcting the market or helping the market. I mean, one side, the government is telling us, you let the free market take its toll. Free market, let it go and see what happens. Yet, this government will not invest in really looking at what can solve the problems of insurance. It gives its consumer advocate, they want to call it by way of insurance, a very thin mandate, a mandate that he does not report directly to this House. It's much like the conflict of commissioner in the federal government, where he has to direct right to the PM and not to the Parliament of Canada, and we know what problems that has caused. And same here, that the insurance advocate answers directly to the minister and not to this House, which I thought would have been very easy to do. I remember the morning the minister announced this fine gentleman as the commissioner, because the one thing I will agree with the minister about this, that the person was a good choice. The person is beyond reproach. He's a fine man. I think he's thought highly of many Nova Scotians. But the problem is, it's not the person, it's the mandate that person has to carry out, and it's the parameters in which he has to work that will, when he brings back a full report or an interim report, there's no onus on government to react to it. So, Mr. Speaker, I will be taking my place. I think I've said what I wanted to say about Bill 45. It's more about what's not in it than what's in it, that I really don't think for any real sense that this will do anything to rectify the skyrocketing costs of automobile insurance in this province. And what it will do is just delay, and we all know the day after this is lifted that the insurance companies will just come in the back door and ramp their rates up again. So insurance in this province, Mr. Chair, needs to be fully vetted, much more than this bill could ever do, and therefore I will not be supporting this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for your comments. I'd like to recognize the member of the Liberal caucus, the member from Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak on Bill number 45, the Insurance Act. Speaker, there's been a lot of discussion that has taken place on this issue in this House, and I certainly do not purport to stand here to claim that this is an issue which has a simple solution, or a solution that's going to meet the approval of all Nova Scotians affected by this very issue. But, Mr. Speaker, it's important that we look at some of the comments that have been made on this issue here. Speaker, we know that there has been a significant increase in insurance rates which has taken place over the last few years. This is not something which began yesterday or the day before, but has been going on for some time. And one thing that we can agree on is that this government has failed to take concrete action in addressing this issue in a timely fashion. And it's only now, on the eve of an election, that their hand is being forced to try to come up with a solution to this. Now, Speaker, I would submit to you that if we did not have the New Brunswick election taking place right now, in which we see that insurance has become the sole issue of that election campaign, that this government would not be as interested in discussing this issue in the form of legislation right now. But they do clearly see that this is an important issue that is being made a top priority, not only in this province, but in our neighbouring province. And I would submit to you even further, Mr. Chair, that the insurance issue is one of the main issues why you and I are not knocking on doorsteps right now in the middle of an election campaign, because of the fact that the government realizes how much of a hot issue this is, and more importantly, how much it realizes that they have failed in the last 4 years to get a grip of this issue or to come forward with a plan which can clearly be implemented to address the needs that Nova Scotians have identified. And I don't think anyone in government benches can dispute that, because if they do have a plan, let them stand in their place and tell us exactly what that plan is. Because we hear in question period the Minister of Environment and Labour stand in his place and say, we have a plan, we're going to release it, only to watch the Premier go out in front of a media scrum and to say, this is not a time to be talking about final solutions and we have not finalized our plan. Now, Mr. Chair, one has to ask, who is telling the truth in all of this, and who may be misguided or who may not have all of the accurate information? Is it the Premier who is not being made aware of this, or is it the Minister of Environment and Labour who is clearly not being upfront with this House or with Nova Scotians in claiming that a plan is actually in place? I would submit to you that his response and the actions of this government make it clear that there is no plan in place. Because one day we hear the Minister of Environment and Labour tell us that, look, public insurance is not feasible. It would cost $500 to $600 million to set up. We're not interested in that. The next day, the Premier stands in front of a media scrum and says, we're not taking anything off the table. We're willing to look at everything. And in fact, if public insurance is the way to go, we're willing to look at it. The very next day, the Minister of Environment and Labour comes in and says, we will look at public insurance if that is the way to go. Then turns around and the Premier writes in his column on Monday saying public insurance is not the way to go, it's too expensive, and if we went with public insurance, that's money that we would not have for roads, schools, or hospitals. Now, Mr. Speaker, strong leadership, a clear course. If that's what you call a clear course, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you there's more fog on that course than I've seen in the highlands of Cape Breton. Trying to drive along there when you can't see the yellow line because of the fog. I think this government has created just as much fog on the issue of insurance with the statements that have been made on this. Mr. Speaker, the fact is there is a problem with the insurance industry in Nova Scotia. I find it amusing, Mr. Speaker, amusing and disappointing to hear the NDP caucus tell us the solution to the problems is simply change who is administrating the insurance industry. That's going to solve all the problems. That's all they've told us. Change who is running insurance, and that will solve all the problems. Mr. Speaker, that logic is almost as if you have a car with 2 flat tires, and someone comes to you and says, let's change the driver, and then the car is going to be okay. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, you still got a car with 2 flat tires, regardless of who the driver is. The insurance industry is the same. We are either going to address the problems with the industry and take concrete action to address that problem, or we're not going to be any further. To simply have the Leader of the Opposition stand in his place and say, change who's operating the car, pay no attention to the 2 flat tires, by changing the operator, the car will work right, it'll work more efficiently. Mr. Speaker, that just doesn't cut it. And Nova Scotians are coming to that realization. But Mr. Speaker, I do expect that argument to come from the NDP. There's no surprise. Them advocating for a publicly run system just doesn't surprise anyone. My colleague from Cape Breton Nova can revert it back to the Regina Manifesto, and that is not surprising. But I got to tell you, hearing the government House Leader and the Premier muse about a publicly run industry. This is a government that the Mayor from Halifax Citadel campaigned saying, close Cisco, open hospital beds. They said the government and the taxpayers have no business to be in business. We got to get out of steel making. I think what's been mentioned, let's sell the parts over, where is it, India? And then we'll let them make steel and we'll buy the steel from them. Sell the steel back to us. But we should not be in the steel making business, they said. That was one of the first statements they made. Then they went on and they said, with Nova Scotia Resources Limited, we got to sell everything off because government has no place in the offshore. That's what they said. Got to let private industry run it. Now when we look here at Bill number 45 and we look at the government statements, now they're musing about taking over an industry. After saying time and time again, government has no place in business, now they're saying maybe we should take over an industry and government can run it more efficiently. Why did we sell Cisco? Why do we sell NSRL? Why are they not creating more Crown corporations in their 4 years? That's the question. If that's suddenly their change in policy, that government should be responsible for industry, well, why not more crown corporations? Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are not being fooled by the fact that this government is willing to say anything it has to try to get re-elected. After being elected by saying the government has no place in business, to now to turn around and say we think maybe we should be able to take over an industry. Mr. Speaker, to make it even more amusing from the government is to hear the Premier say, let's have Atlantic cooperation and let's form an Atlantic insurance industry. Let's have some cooperation amongst our neighboring provinces. Well, Mr. Speaker, we know what the Premier's track record is in getting cooperation from, let's say, Newfoundland. When the boundary dispute came up for the offshore, the Premier said, I'm going to have cooperation in Newfoundland. We're going to come to a reasonable agreement. I'm going to go make my presentation in New Brunswick before the panel. I'm going to represent the interests of Nova Scotia. Well, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, the boundary line that Newfoundland was able to win for the offshore off of Cape Breton almost took into Glace Bay. And yet the Premier says, now I want to go talk cooperation with my colleagues. We had New Brunswick, Bernard Lord, who wanted to be responsible for gas in Nova Scotia. He wanted to make sure northern New Brunswick had gas, whereas we don't even have gas here in this province. That's what Mr. Lord wanted in New Brunswick. And now the Premier turns around and says, let's have Atlantic cooperation. Mr. Speaker, that's why I said here in this House, why don't we just start talking about maritime union again? That's been a great topic. Well, let me see. When did that start? In the 40s and 50s? That's been a fast-moving file. Let's add that on the agenda for the Maritime Council. Put insurance along with maritime union. That should be a solution for Nova Scotia drivers. That should lower your rates anytime soon now. I'm sure that if we sit Pat Binns down and the Premier from Newfoundland and the Premier from New Brunswick together, we should be able to come up with a plan real soon. Or as this government would say, soon, very soon. Now, the Minister of Transportation says I have no sense of history. Well, maybe he can give us a better idea of how quickly they can turn around and bring an Atlantic-run insurance industry. And maybe he can tell us whether he feels that government should be taking over industries and you should be running businesses. You know, maybe the Minister of Transportation wants to tell us that his department is now going to be responsible for all paving contracts. They're not even going to look at the private industry anymore. So maybe they're going to take over all of that. Is that where we're going? You know, Mr. Speaker, where is the messages that are coming? Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, this government said in 1999, strong leadership, a clear course, vote for us, and we'll make sure that we'll be able to address all of these issues. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we have a majority government in this province. A majority government that has said that they would be able to address the issues of Nova Scotians, the day-to-day issues that affect Nova Scotians. And to see a Premier that says, well, what are you going to do? And hey, why don't you help us? That's not what a majority government is all about. That's not what the Premier said in 1999, that I'll need to go ask the opposition as to what I'm supposed to do. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians elected a majority government, and they expected that majority government to be able to deliver good government. And what we have seen time and time again is the fact that this government has failed to deliver on that pledge. Mr. Speaker, give me a recent example, Mr. Speaker, of where a government has been able to take over an industry and to do so in an efficient way. In the last, let's say, 10 years, Mr. Speaker, give us an example of where that has been efficient. Mr. Speaker, we see time and time again where provincial governments are selling off their crown assets, are getting out of business, and are saying that government cannot run business efficiently. The private industry can. That's what this government has said the last 4 years. Their actions establish that. Now to turn around and to say our solution is to put a freeze on the rates. Mr. Speaker, other than waving the white flag, Bill number 45 is this government's white flag to say that it surrenders on this issue, that it has no solutions, it has no plan in place, and is completely giving up on this. So as a last-ditch resort, rather than just come out and openly say we have no plan, we have no vision, we are going to say, well, let's freeze the rates, let's buy us some time, let's hope to get through the next election unscathed, and then we have at least 4 more years not to have to worry about this. Well, Mr. Speaker, one now knows, when one looks at the experience in New Brunswick, that a government that goes to the polls without addressing important social issues such as insurance isn't a government that does so at its peril. And that's why I would submit to you again, Mr. Speaker, that this government is waiting to see what happens to their colleagues in New Brunswick on this very issue. We now clearly see that the New Brunswick government went to the polls without a plan, without a vision on how to deal with this, and as a result, that is why that this election is no longer is no longer under their control and is being controlled by others. And again, I submit to you, Mr. Speaker, insurance is one of the main reasons why you and I are not out on the campaign trail right now, because this government realizes how important of an issue it is. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we have significant problems in the industry itself. We said during last year, we had suggested possibly doing as the other provinces, Newfoundland and New Brunswick, I believe, followed used the same practice, to put an all-party committee that could look at all of the issues affecting.
Order, please. I would ask the member from Richmond if he would entertain a question from the member from the NDP caucus, Halifax Fairview. You've been granted that permission.
Chairman,
the member from Halifax Fairview.
I've been very quietly asking this question, but the member for Richmond is declining to answer, so I thought I'd ask it out loud. Where's the Liberal plan on auto insurance?
The member from Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the member from Halifax Fairview, stay tuned, and that he will be seeing that. He will, as the government would answer to so many of our requests, soon, very soon, as to when he can expect to see that. But again, Mr. Speaker, it shows you how the NDP are misguided. Rather than calling on the government to show what their plan is, to show the strong leadership, clear course, once again, they're diverted and saying, let's look at someone else. Let's look at another party and ask them, rather than focusing on what the government is doing. But that's just, we've seen that time and time again, where the official opposition has failed to realize who has a majority party here in this province. I would submit to you, Mr. Chair, they are looking at the polls, and that is why they're diverting more attention towards us. But time, Mr. Speaker, will be the one that will judge that, Mr. Chair. And I would submit to you again that the polls are one of the main reasons why, again, you and I are not on the campaign trail right now, and why this government has not called an election. And as much as the Minister of Transportation and others might laugh, they may want to ask the Premier, why are we not in an election if the member from Richmond is so incorrect in the statement that he did make, Mr. Speaker. Again, as I said, Mr. Speaker, freezing the insurance rates is nothing but a Band-Aid solution. It's giving a Band-Aid to a patient that is hemorrhaging. We need to be able to address the fundamental problems with the insurance industry itself, and I again submit to you that for the NDP to simply say, we have a car with 2 flat tires, let's change the driver and the car will work okay. Pay no attention to the 2 flat tires. No one is buying that, Mr. Speaker. That is the bottom line. And when I went home this weekend and I attended several functions, from the opening of Les Jeux de l'Acadie to the closing to les Jeux de l'Acadie, to a 50th anniversary party, to meetings in my constituency office, they want to talk about insurance. And what did they say? What difference does it make if it's the private industry that runs it or the government if you don't address the fundamental problems with the industry itself? So, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are not being fooled by the idea that's let go and change who runs the industry without addressing the problems. That's the fundamental issue we have here, Mr. Speaker. Now, is the government willing to come forward and say, here is our plan to address the issues with the industry? Not at all. Mr. Speaker, we have the UARB decision. What does the UARB decision tell us? Now, I'm not sure where the NDP stands on this, because based on the statements made from the mayor from Cape Breton Centre, I'm not sure if he's challenging the findings of the UARB, or if he is questioning the legitimacy of the decision by the UARB, or if he feels that the UARB somehow has misled this House in their decision. But Mr. Speaker, the UARB went out and got an independent actuary report that came in and looked at the Nova Scotia industry. At the end of the day, they came out and they indicated there were significant losses within the industry. Now, the NDP stands in its place and says they don't agree that there were losses. They say there was no losses at all, there were profits made. So then I have to ask, what information do they have that the UARB did not have? And again, are they claiming that the UARB as an independent body has somehow misled this House and misled Nova Scotians in their findings? Is that what their statement is? And if the member from Cape Breton Centre wants to stand in his place and clarify that, I encourage him to do so. Yet, Mr. Speaker, we know what the UARB decision has told us. No, and Mr. Chair, I don't expect him to stand in his place and object to that either. I think he sees the error of his ways in what he said. But, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, we have the UARB telling us there are fundamental problems within the industry itself that need to be addressed. Now, we can stand here as legislators and say, well, we think a majority government, 4 years in office, should be able to stand in its place, wave the white flag of surrender, and say, let's just freeze the rates. Again, Mr. Speaker, that is not a reasonable solution. That is a proposal being put forward by a party that is bankrupt of ideas, bankrupt of solutions, and bankrupt with a vision as to how to address the problems in the insurance industry, and that is more interested in going to the polls by trying to convince Nova Scotians they have a handle of the situation rather than actually taking concrete action that would in fact put a plan forward to address this issue. Mr. Chair, we have heard stories from one end of this province, all of us even in our own backyards as members, as to what impact this has had on Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, not only average Nova Scotians, I would say one of the worst hits are either our working poor, those on disability, or even our seniors. Seniors who in many ways see it as a luxury to have a vehicle, who hold that as one of their last steps of independence that they have to be able to get out and about, and to now see that they might have to give up that independence because of the fact they just cannot afford insurance, Mr. Speaker, clearly tells us that we have a significant problem here. Now, Mr. Speaker, I hear my socialist colleagues here making some sort of clucking sounds, but Mr. Speaker, one of the provinces I notice that when they talk about publicly run systems, they never seem to mention British Columbia. Now, I always wonder why. Why do they not mention BC? That's a publicly run system. That's a system put in, I believe, by an NDP government. And I wonder why they don't talk about BC. Let me see now. Could it be because the BC system, let me see, I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, lost $250 million? Could that be the reason why they don't mention British Columbia? Could it be because the people of BC turfed out an NDP government that was not interested in bringing in competition, and now have a government that they have told open up those industries to competition that can bring us better rates, better benefits, and a better system, which is being put in place now? Could that be why they don't talk about BC? It's always only Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but not BC, their other cousin, their socialist, former socialist cousin in BC. That's why I wonder if, well, the member from Halifax Fairview is clucking over here saying they had a profit, then why do they not talk about the experience in BC? For example, if I'm not mistaken, I believe British Columbia last year laid off 600 employees from the provincially run insurance system. Did you hear that, Mr. Chair? They laid off 600 employees from their system. Now, a publicly run system, you laid off 600. How many did you have in total? Well, Mr. Chair, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was in the range of 1,500 civil servants running the system out in British Columbia. How many would it take to run a system in Nova Scotia? How many would it take to run a system for the Atlantic provinces or for the Maritime provinces? I'd love to see those figures, Mr. Chair, but I don't hear that coming from the NDP, because I'm curious if they went to Nova Scotia and say, we want to hire an additional 400 to 500 individuals to run your insurance system and you're going to save money at the end of the day, see what the reaction would be. yet you never hear those figures. All you hear, Mr. Chair, is the statement that you got to change the driver who's running insurance. Private industry, bad. Put it in government, and everything will be well. And when you ask them any more questions, no, let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that. This is the solution to all of our problems. Now, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians see the silliness in that. They see that the leader of the NDP will say anything it takes to try to get attention. Everything to him is, look, this is all easy. The government will run it. The government will fix it, and all will be well. But what's most disappointing is to see the government of the day to stand and to say, one day, the Minister of Environment and Labour himself stood and said it would cost $500 to $600 million we would have to add to the debt to run a publicly run system. That's what the government House leader said.
Order. Order, please. The member from Richmond has the floor. Carry on, member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To say that on one day and then to turn around and have the Premier say, we are still looking at the possibility of a government-run system. This is a government that said we need to get out of the steel-making industry, we need to get out of the offshore. Government has no place in business. And then they turn around and they muse about taking over an entire industry. Mr. Speaker, you know, Nova Scotians are not being fooled by this. Nova Scotians, well, you know, Mr. Speaker, Speaker, it's amusing because I hear the socialists talking about New Brunswick, and it's quite ironic there when you hear the press talk about the NDP leader in New Brunswick, whose main goal is to try to find company for herself when she gets in the House of Assembly. Now, that's how legitimate of a party they are in New Brunswick. I would submit to you, Mr. Speaker, many of those socialist members sitting here today might have the same hope next election, hoping they've got company to sit next to the next election also. But again, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, in 1999, Nova Scotians elected a majority government, a majority Tory government, who were being told by the leader at the time, strong leadership, a clear course. That's what they were told, Mr. Speaker. They were told they would have a government that would address today's problems with today's solutions. Now, Mr. Speaker, they haven't done so with our finances. They couldn't do so with Bill 68. They had to go with one of the most regressive pieces of legislation ever seen in this province's history. They weren't able to address a solution with the paramedics, had to force a strike. They haven't been able to address a solution with the RSS workers, who are on, day 40 of a strike, Mr. Speaker. And what do they do? What do they do about insurance, Mr. Chair? Again, they say, we have no solution. We are waving the white flag. As a majority government, we are asking the House of Assembly and its duly elected members to approve a bill that all it will do is try to buy the government time. Time in the best interest of Nova Scotians? No. Time in what they feel is in the best interest of Tory re-election strategy. That is what it comes down to, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotians expected better in 1999. They were told they would get better in 1999 and have spent the last 4 years in seeing the disappointment of the government that was elected in 1999 under the leadership of the Premier. And to see the Premier himself, Mr. Chair, stand in front of the media and stand in this House, and in 1 minute they've got a plan, the next minute say, this is not a time to be talking about a final solution. Everything's still on the table. Public insurance is bad, then maybe we'll look at it. Come Monday, it's bad again. Today in question period, we're still going to look at it. Mr. Speaker, I tell you once again, when I recall the Tory convention, I remember the president of the Tories reading in the paper where he had found these flip-flops and he couldn't identify whose they were. We now know clearly. He found them under the Premier's bed at the hotel. Because they were clearly his, whether it be Sunday shopping, whether it be debt, whether it be insurance. That is all you have seen from this government, Mr. Speaker. And that's why Bill 45, what Nova Scotians are telling us, is it's not good enough. We expect better from majority government. We expect We expect a solution to the problems within the industry, not just changing the driver. As I said before, under the NDP plan, you've got a car with 2 flat tires, change the driver, and the car's going to work all right. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, under their plan, you still got 2 flat tires, just somebody else administrating the system. That's not good enough, and Nova Scotians are not buying it. And that's why they are saying we need to have a real solution that is going to bring down rates. Not a matter of government saying we're going to freeze rates today. Even the NDP are saying just freezing rates today will only delay the fact that the insurance industry is going to increase rates tomorrow. Even they've acknowledged that. If that is the case, Mr. Chair, then simply freezing the rates is not enough. Freezing the rates will not bring the rates down. In one instance, the government House Leader told us, we're going to put in Mr. George Jordan. He's going to look at all sorts of concerns. He'll bring back a report. That'll help us come up with a plan. Now, before he even gets the chance to do that, the government comes in and says, we're going to freeze the rates. Why? Because they said, we said this was a serious concern. We let the industry know we were taking this seriously. And they turned around and they still tried to increase rates. So we're going to bring down the hammer and put a freeze. Well, Mr. Speaker, like Nova Scotians themselves, when it comes to this government, the insurance industry took the same approach, in that they just didn't take this government seriously. And they just knew what this government's statements were. They didn't plan to back up. That this government did not have the vision in place to deal with this issue. So even though the government said we take insurance very seriously, we want to work towards a solution for this, at the end of the day, the industry said, we're still going to put forward our request to increase rates, because at the end of the day, we know this government's not really serious about this issue. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, Bill number 45 is right up there on my own list of lost opportunities by this government. Speaker, 4 years, this government has had $1 billion in additional yearly revenue since 1999. And yet again, Mr. Speaker, we see time and time again lost opportunities to deal with the real priorities of Nova Scotians. Bill number 45 will go down on the list of another wasted opportunity by this government to be able to take control of an issue that affects Nova Scotians, that Nova Scotians are saying is a top priority, along with roads, education, healthcare, and in fact, Mr. Speaker, when one looks, that has been able to take control of the election in New Brunswick. Bernard Lord wants to talk about health and economy, and nobody else does. All they want to talk about is insurance. And I submit to you again, Mr. Chair, that's one of the main reasons why we are not at the polls right now, because this government realizes they have no control over this issue. They have no control over this issue. Just as their colleague in New Brunswick had no control over the issue, just as he wasted the opportunity to address it, this government is wasting the opportunity. Week by week, the government does poll upon poll upon poll, trying to find a solution, trying to find a middle ground where they can skate and try to get themselves re-elected without offering real solutions. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, in majority government, there is no excuse for the fact that this government has not taken the opportunity to address it. Mr. Speaker, I realize with the time approaching, and I will take the opportunity to make some further remarks on Thursday, I believe, on a future date. But with that, Mr. Chair, I will move a motion to adjourn the debate at this time to be resumed on Thursday.
Thank you. There's been a motion from the member from Richmond to adjourn debate on the bill for this evening. At this time, I would like to recognize the government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee to now rise and report considerable progress and beg leave to sit again on a future day.
So moved.
Chairman of the Committee, House on Bills reports.
The committee's met and considered bills 53, 43, 36, 1, and 28. And the chairman's been instructed to recommend them to the favorable consideration of the House without amendment, except Bill 1 with certain amendments.
Agreed?
Well,
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, tomorrow being Opposition Day, I defer to the Honourable House Leader from the Liberal Party.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow we'll sit from 2 to 6, and following the daily routine question period, we'll be calling Resolution 796. You can guess what that's going to be about. And Bill number 39. So I move we adjourn.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. tomorrow. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried. We're adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.